This is the control tower. Make a left turn. Over. Roger.
Here's a complicated one for you guys. Galactic Attack is actually based on an arcade game called Ray Force, which was released in arcades back in 1994, with this Saturn port arriving the following year in 1995. Now get this, in Japan the game was called Layer Section, the North American version is called Galactic Attack, and the European arcade version was called Gunlock. That's a ridiculous amount of names for the same game, don't you think? Even though the Saturn is known for its long list of excellent spaceship shooters, most people don't even realize that Galactic Attack, which was published in North America by Acclaim, is actually a fantastic shooter. For years it was found in bargain bins all across North America, and only in the last 6 to 10 years have people really started to take notice of it. The name Layer Section actually makes the most sense because the game is split into two distinct layers, top and bottom. To attack enemies on the top layer, you use your regular laser attack, or standard shot, which becomes more powerful as you collect weapon-enhancing gems. The bottom layer's enemies can only be destroyed by shooting missiles at locked-on enemies. Locked-on enemies? What's that all about? Well, ever play Panzer Dragoon? You know that reticule you have where you highlight enemies and then unleash a barrage of attacks on them? Well, that's pretty much how this works. You highlight enemies on the bottom layer with your targeting reticule and then attack them with missiles. Simple as that. What's unique here is that enemies on the bottom layer frequently move from that layer to the top layer. So there's always pressure to defeat as many enemies on the bottom layer as possible before the top layer fills with so many enemies and projectiles that it makes it impossible for you to dodge. Like your regular laser, missiles can also be powered up, so you want to make sure you collect as many gems as possible. Yellow gems boost your laser to the next power level, whereas red gems require 3 in order to do the same thing. The power-up system isn't nearly as deep as in other shmups, and surprisingly there aren't any speed power-ups or screen-clearing bombs. The emphasis here though is on pattern recognition and knowing when to clear out that bottom layer, and it's hell of a lot of fun. Your goal is to make it through the game's 7 stages with nothing but 4 continues and a handful of lives per continue. This vertical shooter isn't the most challenging out there, but by the time you make it to stage 4, you'll see that the difficulty ramps up quite nicely. And that's actually one of the best things I enjoy about the game is the difficulty curve. It's not just impossible from go. The audio-visual presentation has aged perfectly. This is what I love about 2D shmups. They look great even today. There's a ton of parallax scrolling going on and some really nifty 3D-like effects. The projectiles are nice and bright, so you don't have to worry about not seeing incoming shots, and I love the fact that you can remove the heads-up display by pressing the L button. That was a really great touch. Want to know the best part about the game? It's the fact that there's no slowdown whatsoever. That's right, even with all the madness going on, multiple layers, the parallax scrolling, and tons of projectiles, the game just blasts through it all. And that's really impressive when you realize this was an early Saturn release, and especially when you compare it to something like In the Hunt, which was absolutely chock full of slowdown. The soundtrack is pretty good too, but the sound effects are just great. One thing I want to point out here is that if you do enjoy the music, you can rip it straight off the disc. That's right, it's one of those games where you could take the game disc, put it in your CD player, and enjoy the music. Now, considering how few shooters made their way to the North American Saturn, this one is easily one of the best. I highly recommend you check it out and would suggest doing so very quickly as the prices of Saturn games continue to rise. What used to be a bargain bin $5 game can now run you upwards of $50 for a complete copy. I suggest you act fast and enjoy a fantastic shooter.